Marcus Webb stepped off the transport shuttle and immediately regretted every decision that had led him to this moment on the distant world of Viridian Prime. The colony planet stretched before him in shades of violet and amber, its twin suns casting long shadows across the residential district, where he would spend the next 3 years as a structural engineer for the Terran Colonial Authority. The air smelled faintly of copper and something floral he couldn't identify, and the gravity felt just slightly lighter than Earth standard, making each step feel oddly bouncy. His company had promised him competitive pay, full benefits, and a chance to work on cutting-edge habitat construction. What they hadn't mentioned in the recruitment materials was that Viridian Prime was primarily settled by the Kalani, a species of tall, elegant humanoids with iridescent skin that shifted colors based on their emotional state. What they really hadn't mentioned was that the Kalani were a matriarchal society where males rarely left their home territories, making Marcus the only human male in a residential complex of 300 Kalani females. He discovered this fact approximately 40 seconds after arriving at his assigned apartment. "You must be the new engineer," said a melodic voice from the doorway adjacent to his. A Kalani woman stood there, her skin rippling through shades of curious amber and welcoming green. She was nearly 7 feet tall, with 4 graceful arms and large eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of his appearance. "I am Vila. I live in Unit 7B. You are very small." Marcus, who stood at a respectable 5'10", felt suddenly inadequate. Hello. I'm Marcus. Nice to meet you." "Your species has only 2 arms," Vila observed, tilting her head. "How do you accomplish complex tasks?" "We, manage," Marcus said, fumbling with his key card. Within an hour, his doorbell had chimed 6 times. Each visitor was a Kalani neighbor bearing gifts of welcome, questions about human biology, or both. They were universally polite, genuinely kind, and deeply fascinated by the strange 2-armed mammal who had moved into their building by the end of his first day. Marcus had learned several important facts about Kalani culture. They were communal by nature, considered privacy a mild eccentricity rather than a fundamental right, and believed that sharing meals was the foundation of all meaningful relationships. They also possessed strength that far exceeded human norms, which he discovered when Vela helped him move his furniture by lifting his entire couch with one hand. "This is very light," she said, looking concerned. "Is your furniture made for children?" "It's made for humans," Marcus replied weakly. Work proved to be the easier part of his new life. The construction site was a marvel of interspecies cooperation, with humans, Kalani, and 3 other alien species working together to build a new research facility on the outskirts of the colony. Marcus's engineering expertise was valued, his designs were implemented, and his human perspective on load-bearing structures turned out to be exactly what the project needed. His personal life, however, became increasingly complicated. The Kalani women in his building adopted him as a kind of collective curiosity. They invited him to communal dinners where he was the only one who couldn't change his skin color to match his mood. They asked him endless questions about Earth, human mating practices, and why his species wore so many clothes. They worried constantly about his well-being, convinced that a creature with only 2 arms and such fragile bones must need constant supervision. "You should not carry those supply containers alone," said Farah, another neighbor who worked in colonial administration. Her skin flashed protective orange as she watched Marcus haul equipment into his apartment. "You will damage yourself." "I've been carrying things my whole life," Marcus protested. "Your whole life on a planet with different gravity," Thera countered. "Here you might overextend and tear something." She wasn't entirely wrong. Marcus had already learned that the lower gravity made it easy to misjudge his own strength. and he'd nearly launched a coffee mug through his kitchen window that morning. The real challenge came during the third week, when Marcus was invited to the building's monthly community gathering. He'd tried to decline politely, but the Kalani concept of polite declination apparently didn't include actually being allowed to stay home. "You must come," Vila insisted. "It is how we maintain social cohesion. Also, everyone wants to hear about Earth food. Rena has been researching your cuisine and has prepared something called pizza." Marcus wasn't sure whether to be touched or terrified. The gathering took place in the building's central courtyard, a beautiful space filled with bioluminescent plants that glowed in the evening darkness. Roughly 60 Kalani women had assembled, their skin colors creating a shifting rainbow of social excitement. Marcus felt like a single brown dot in a sea of moving color. Rena's pizza turned out to be a valiant attempt that involved some kind of purple flatbread and a protein Marcus chose not to identify. He ate it with a smile and pronounced it delicious, which caused Rena's skin to flush with pleased pink dot. Then came the questions. "Is it true humans can only perceive 3 primary colors?" asked one woman. "Do you really have bones inside your body instead of a proper exoskeleton?" asked another. "Can you demonstrate this thing called dancing?" asked a third. Marcus did his best to answer, feeling increasingly like an exhibit at a zoo. But there was no malice in their curiosity, only genuine interest and a desire to understand this strange creature who had moved into their community. What surprised him was how much they already knew about humanity's history. The Kalani had done their research. They knew about human wars, human art, human achievements and failures. They knew about the species that had clawed its way up from a single planet to spread across the dome, stars through sheer stubborn determination. "Your people are known for refusing to quit," said an older Kalani woman named Mora. Skin had settled into a deep, thoughtful blue. "You encounter obstacles that would cause most species to reconsider their goals, and you simply find another way forward. It is very strange. Also somewhat inspiring." Marcus felt a flush of pride he hadn't expected. "We're persistent, I guess." "Persistent," Mora repeated, as if tasting the word. "Yes, that is a very human quality." As weeks turned into months, Marcus found his place in the community. He learned to read the subtle shifts in Kalani skin tones, understanding when someone was happy, worried, or amused. He discovered that his human perspective on problem-solving was valuable in ways he hadn't anticipated. When the building's water recycling system malfunctioned, it was Marcus who figured out the mechanical issue, while his Kalani neighbors provided the physical strength to implement the repairs. He also learned that humans had one significant advantage over the Kalani: versatility in environmental adaptation. When a sudden cold snap hit the colony, Marcus was comfortable in temperatures that left his neighbors sluggish and uncomfortable. He spent 3 days checking on everyone in the building, making sure heating units were working and that no one needed assistance. "You are surprisingly durable," Vila observed as Marcus delivered hot soup to her apartment. "We thought your species was fragile, but you adapt very quickly." "We're full of surprises," Marcus agreed. The turning point came during the 5th month, when a structural emergency at the construction site threatened to derail the entire project. A support column had been installed incorrectly, and the weight distribution was all wrong. The Kalani engineers were convinced they needed to demolish the entire section and start over. Marcus looked at the problem from a human perspective, thinking about the old buildings on Earth that had stood for centuries, despite imperfect construction. He proposed a solution that involved redistributing the load through a series of smaller supports rather than relying on a single column. A technique inspired by ancient Roman architecture. It worked. The project continued on schedule, and Marcus earned a reputation as the engineer who could find unconventional solutions to complex problems. His Kalani colleagues began actively seeking his input. valuing the different perspective his human brain provided. Back at the residential complex, he was no longer the curiosity from Earth. He was simply Marcus, the neighbor who helped fix things, who shared strange stories about human history, and who had learned to cook Kalani dishes that didn't trigger his gag reflex. On his 1-year anniversary on Viridian Prime, the building threw him a celebration. Rena made another attempt at pizza that was actually quite good. Vela gave a speech about the value of diversity in communities. Mora presented him with a traditional Kalani friendship bracelet woven from fiber that changed colors with his body temperature. Marcus stood in the courtyard, surrounded by alien women who had become his friends, his neighbors, and his community. He thought about how terrified he'd been stepping off that shuttle, how overwhelmed he'd felt by the strangeness of everything. He thought about human persistence, about adapting to impossible situations, about finding your place in the universe, even when that place is 300 light years from home in an apartment building full of 7 foot tall women with 4 arms and color-changing skin. Thank you, he said simply, and meant it with every fiber of his stubborn human heart. Vela's skin flashed warm gold. You are welcome, small strange friend. Now come eat. Rena has made something called tacos, and we need you to verify tea.